Hello and welcome to another Aucademy Live. As you may have noticed, it's me, David. Yes, I am everywhere, including in the cupboard. Today I'm here with Callum Brazzo, and we're going to be talking about Ripples, a story of being lost and found. First of all, we're going to start off with some brief audio descriptions. So my name's David Gray Hammond. I'm a male person with a beard, a lip piercing. I'm quite large. I have a shaved head that actually needs shaving again. And I'm wearing sunglasses because I have lost my regular glasses. I'm wearing a grey t-shirt and sat in a very blue room. Callum, would you mind introducing yourself and doing a brief audio description?
Yep, so my name is Callum Brazzo. I am wearing glasses. I'm a male, white male, wearing glasses with an orange hat with red headphones on, in a pink shirt with two hearts on, and the words, "It's not selfish, it's self-care," which I think is appropriate for today, being Valentine's Day. I am sat on I don't know how to describe the colour, brownish sofa with a green wall behind me and a lemur on my back and an abstract painting. So quite a lot visually going on. Yeah, and I've got a beard.
Cool. Well, pleased to be joined by the lemur. It's always good to see lemurs get more representation in the autistic community. We're here to talk about Ripples, a story of being lost and found. This is your creative project. But before we get into that, I just wanted to recap for people who perhaps haven't seen you on an Aucademy Live before, Callum. How did you discover you were autistic? What did that journey look like?
Yeah, so unfortunately, it started. So I remember at primary school, distinctly thinking that everyone else was having an issue with me, and I was just fine playing by myself in the corner of the playground. Very few, if any, friends. People asking me if I have any friends. People being worried about me. And when I got to secondary school, I remember this consciousness switch of, I would like to connect with people. I'm not really sure. There's definitely a disconnect between me and them. I'm not sure why they think like they think. Um, and so I suppose that was the mental beginning. I wasn't physically diagnosed or recognized, um, but until I was 21. So past secondary school, I spent a lot of time in what was isolation then, the SEN unit. Um, I mean, I was very reticent as a child. Poetry was always my outlet, and yeah, that really carried me through everything that was going on in my life at the time. The depression, parental divorce when I was in my formative years, getting taxied to college, finishing my mainstream schooling in an alternative setting because it wasn't for me, essentially, and then doing a bunch of different things after that. So Princess Trust course, I dabbled in media, all these alternative things I would go on to do because I didn't finish my mainstream schooling, if that all makes sense.
There's definitely a lot of parallels there with my own journey, and particularly I like that you had poetry as an outlet. For me, it was dancing. I've got national awards in various forms of dance, and I think it's weird because you have this thing that you love, but because it's not typical for someone your gender or age, people kind of act like it's this big problem. Like, oh, they're not like the other boys. And it's like, well, can't I just be me? Um, but I think you've definitely I've seen you perform poetry at the Autistic Inclusive Meets Pride. I've read some of your poetry as well, and I think you've definitely found your area of life. You're a very gifted creative, and I'm quite excited to do this live with you tonight. So we're here to talk about ripples. I've read a little bit of it on your Substack, but for people who don't know, could you talk a bit about what ripples is and how it came about?
Yeah, so how did it come about? It was originally called Janice, who is one of the characters that features in the story. So on Substack, if people aren't familiar with the platform, you can subscribe at different levels, whatever you're comfortable with. So I don't know if you've read the first few chapters, David, or the whole thing, or started to read the whole thing. But yeah, I wanted to give back, I think, creatively and delve into some new territory because, and maybe without realizing it, it was more, maybe it was a conscious choice of, because I remember I've done a TEDx talk, and this is related, I promise, but I remember doing that and thinking, well, I could tell my story as like I've just said to you about going through school, all this stuff, but when you do something on YouTube, a TEDx, something like a TEDx talk, I wanted it to last beyond me, and it wasn't really about me. So I think this was more that territory of, even though it touches on stuff that's very meaningful for me. So did you ask for a basic plot line? Sorry.
Yeah, so just tell us a bit about ripples. Like
Yeah.
plot line and how it came about, that sort of thing.
Yeah, so it's about an autistic character called Lucas and uh, his friend Janice, who has dementia. And there's various elements of feeling lost and found. So Marcus has been masking his whole life as an autistic person, but yet has the hallmarks of a quote unquote normal life. He's had a job. He's very confident in himself, which I think was a very intentional choice because, in my experience, you see too many autistic people, and maybe it's changed now, but I mean, this is 5 years in the making. This thing, this creative project. But I just remember thinking, I want to make Lucas. Yes, there's struggles going on, but it's more. So it's about family and it's about addiction. The first chapter is where his dad, trigger warning for talk of suicide. But his father passes. His father passes away. That's the first scene, and he's an alcoholic. So um, it's very easy to, I think, judge someone that's going through that as maybe a bad person. But as you'll hopefully discover in the story, there's again elements of even him wanting to be found, and there's layers to each character. It's not simply because the first chapter is very much about Lucas not being accepted by his dad. He runs away, and his dad passes, and then it's a ripple effect, literally, of that, when because he jumps off a bridge, and it's the physical and metaphorical ripple effects of that impact, of that moment.
That that's a sort of a really intriguing thing, and I like that kind of storytelling where you have those sort of, an event that has occurred, and you get to see how that progresses over time. Because one of the things I like to talk about in my own work is the fact that the things we do right this second, they might seem quite small or insignificant perhaps, but as they ripple out throughout time, you can see these effects that just go on and the impact that our actions have on the world. So I think I'm definitely excited to get into that in the Ripple story, and I'm glad to hear that there's mention of addiction, because obviously it's an issue that impacts a lot of autistic people, whether personally or through loved ones. I think a lot of autistic people can probably relate to those experiences. So the character Lucas has this, has a best friend called Janice who has dementia. I guess when I think about the story, one of the questions that comes to mind for me is why is it important that we know, that he has this older friend called Janice who has dementia? Like, in the world of Ripples, how does this friendship play out or come about? What is it that we're getting from that?
Yeah, so Janice's journey of a story is finding out who Greg is, and again, people have told her that he doesn't exist because being someone with dementia, it's very easy to be dismissive of, oh yeah, you just live in your own little world. But it's not real, and people try to pull her out of it. And so Lucas decides to help his friend, to almost to become Greg. The idea of Greg, he embodies, and through that experience learns more about Janice. Janice connects further with Lucas, and they find more about themselves.
Okay.
Yeah, and there's just the whole overarching theme of addiction is very strong. Actually, when I started writing this, it wasn't as much, it didn't play as major a role in my life as it came to play in my life. But just people close to me, as you mentioned, have fallen into addictions, and so it's almost that it's I didn't intend to make it as personal as it's now become, but of course, life experiences happen. Something I did intend on is the use of notes throughout the story. So Lucas was always writing notes to his dad, and leaving them in his bottles that he would drink, hoping that he would read them. And going back to the first part of the story, in this twist of events, I suppose, his dad writes his own note and puts it in his bottle, and hopes that someone finds his note as a way of continuing that. He feels very ashamed of not accepting Lucas as he should have, and being lost in his own world through addiction. And there's again like layers to that. But I hope that people see that there's good in that. I think that's very important. But yeah, Lucas communicating through notes this whole time is very much like my own life, and I've never really been one to imagine as such a story. I think it's only helped that a lot of my own journey mirrors Lucas, at least. And maybe people will find that boring. For example, I've worked in a factory. Lucas, I describe him as having worked and working in a factory. But I think there's very, like, I'll talk about how his ear defenders for you wear them in a factory for the noise, sensory reasons, but also, of course, you've got headphones, so like there's a double meaning there and so notes is a big part of the communication of Lucas, but also the music that gets played through the headphones. So on YouTube, to segue into YouTube, the YouTube side of things, if I can, if that's okay.
Yeah, that's fine.
I've made a playlist called Ripples EC, which stands for Emotional Consciousness, because throughout the story there'll be songs that he's listening to that I'll highlight lyrics from very intentionally, and it's one might be "Leave Out All the Rest" by Linkin Park. I can't think of all of them. The first one, or one of the most important ones, is "My Scene" by Seth Century, a rapper that I really enjoy, Australian rapper. And in his song, it goes, oh, I could be Greg at least for the weekend, and so that's where the light bulb goes off in his head, in Lucas's head, where it's, oh, what if I, I'm used to masking, so it's not going to be too much of a stretch for me to become this Greg if it helps my friend Janice. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think, first of all, I think it's really cool that you're sort of creating this immersive experience that goes beyond just what's on the paper, for want of a better word. You know, you've got this playlist on YouTube and things like that. You know, there's this world to Ripples. There's a feeling of world building in it, which I like. One of the things I wanted to come back to was the relationship between Lucas and Janice, because you talk about, you know, Janice is constantly being invalidated and told her experience isn't real. And I think that sits really well alongside a lot of autistic people's experience, who many of us also find that our experiences are invalidated, and, you know, that the things we think are incorrect or the way we approach things is wrong. And I wonder that parallel that exists there between what is probably Lucas's experience and as well as Janice's, was that intentional or a happy accident?
So I wanted to have a contrast, but I wanted to bind them together in more ways than one, and that is, so yes, I did want to connect them. I also think, building on that point, in terms of language, and this is not something I don't think I mentioned this much in the story. I might be wrong. It's been a while since I need to refresh my own memory, even though I can tell you most things about it. But people have no problem calling dementia symptoms and a disease, but you would never. That's very unhealthy when it comes to autistic language, and so that was a very intentional dichotomy of language where, oh, we don't think twice about calling dementia a disease because so this is a disease, like people would call it a disease, symptoms, all this pathology, but that's definitely, like, Lucas actively rejects that. He has a ritual that he does a few in the morning, and he'll almost talk outward to himself, and ask, what does the world want to see? Like, what face am I going to put on today? And then he sticks a middle finger up at the mirror and goes, "F that, I'm going to do what I want to do." And so he's very, say, confident, which I was again very important to me, that the character isn't this pitied piece of a bigger story, and being autistic is okay. It's not hidden. He's autistic. He embraces it, and that's again very important for me.
It makes me think about Lucas's sort of motivations in the story, and obviously friendship is a big motivator there. You know, the love we have for our friends, you know, becoming Greg to try and add some, I guess, to reduce maybe the level of invalidation that Janice is experiencing. But I wonder, in terms of motivations, is there, like, for Lucas, a concern there that what he is seeing happen to his friend in the form of dementia, that could be something that happens to him at some point?
I think so. There's a part of the first few chapters where he just addresses what I've just said, really, and what you're indicating, I believe, is that you see far too many people that think, I can't remember how I phrased it, but it was something like, um, he's very much against the power narrative, and it's not so much because he's known Janice for quite a while, and the way they connect is not maybe how neurotypical people, people that it's not a way that you might expect, but that's okay because there's no words needed. It's just, this is how it is, and we understand that. There's like an understanding that is beyond words almost, and yeah, I think the whole reason for Lucas, because Janice is most nights just screaming into the darkness about for Greg, and there's a carer involved called Haley, and she just often like brings her back in, so that Janice can stop doing that. And I think Lucas is that person to say like, well, what if Greg exists? Like, why isn't Greg coming like to her aid if that's what she needs? Like, what's this Greg all about? Like, he must be some weirdo. Like, he's very much like, okay, well, should we explore that? You know, even if he doesn't exist, like, why are we not at least going with Janice rather than trying to pull her out of whatever world she's in?
I think that speaks to me as well as a schizophrenic, because a lot of when I have episodes and I have what doctors would call a delusion, people have this need to pull me out of that world my mind has created, to tell me why my thoughts can't be trusted. But actually, sometimes for me as a schizophrenic, what I need is for someone to validate that actually this is real for me. It's not real for other people, but for me, it is 100% real. And I'm excited to read more into that and see that develop in the story. And, it sounds like there's some very complex characters there at the forefront with a lot of life, really. And I think, this is something that I enjoy about sort of these sorts of stories, is that for me the characters feel real. It's not like, oh, this is just something I'm reading. It's like it's almost like it's created a pocket of the universe where the characters take form. And with that in mind, are there any other characters that you've not mentioned yet or not talked about much that you're excited for people to meet?
There aren't that many characters, but I think there is, and I think I can say this objectively, there is depth because I wanted to make it that way, where it isn't just one thing going on. But I think in total there's probably about 5 characters, but one character I can speak about that I haven't really is Haley, the carer that I talked about briefly. But she's also an artist, and some of the
Oh,
story gets told through her art, and she really gets on with Lucas, and in a way that I suppose, yeah, it's just nice to have someone that's an ally in this world. Um, and yeah, she just gets him. It's not really necessarily a romantic thing. It's just we're on the same side here. Let's see how we can help Janice. And yeah, being an artist myself, very, very I wanted to get some. There's all kinds of personal parts of the story in a way, like the whole, Lucas being um, someone that's written notes a lot of the time. And my dad I would come home from school with notes in my pockets, and dad would think it's rubbish. And go, no, that's a poem. And then so it's been really fun for me to write, and kind of therapy and painting the picture that I want to see. People talk about be the change you want to see in the world, and I feel very responsible for representing an autistic identity. Not all autistic identities, because there's no way I or anyone can do that. But I definitely feel that I'm just privileged to be able to just put out something that I not only I'm passionate about, but hopefully speaks to the depth of autistic experience. And again, it is very much about empowerment, as well as it's about feeling lost and actually maybe going with it. Rather, yeah. So there's lots going on. So
I think it's important though, because in terms of representing this particular autistic experience, I think in recent years we've seen an over-reliance on sort of I don't want to say technical, but that's probably the best one I can think of, like technical representations of autistic experience. So, in fact, it's something I do a lot myself. You know, I write non-fiction books, I publish blog posts that are based on research. You know, I use infographics. I take quite a technical approach to explaining autistic experience to people, and I think actually what excites me about this is it's a chance to almost neuroqueer how we are putting information out about autistic people, because you are you are still teaching people about autistic experience, but you're doing it through a more artistic approach. You know, it feels more creative, perhaps. I can't really find the words to explain, but I hope you know what I'm saying here. You know, that creative art form approach, rather than that sort of technical, here's the research, here's what the academics are saying, here's what the public is saying. You know, I think that do you feel perhaps that perhaps the artistic approach is one that is underrepresented when it comes to educating on autistic experience?
Yeah, I think I would, and this is not to slight you or anyone else, but I think I would rather, because it gels more immediately with what I've known my whole life, which is to find a creative outlet for ultimately painful experiences and things that I want to say, find autistic way to express that, healthy way to express that. Making something like this with, yes, a narrative framework, but something that has life to it, and not to say that textbooks don't, but a lot of textbooks like can just be very focused, and there's a time and space for that, of course, where you just need to list this, and this is what you need to know, like in a school. But I do think, yeah, I very much enjoy almost doing the same thing, but like I say, in a different way. And one thing I like to, again, the empowering nature of it is, I'm trying to think of some specific examples, but I might through Lucas's character, I might state something that is, it just is. It's not
Yeah,
something to really dwell on in a negative space. It just is, and that's the story just continues like that. Okay, that's cool. Like, okay, I think there's a time when Lucas has a bit of a rough time, and Haley just checks in with a text message, I think, and it's it just is. It's just like, okay, well, you need space. That's cool. Message me when you're okay, kind of thing. Like, it's not
yeah,
this big drama for. And it's not to say that there aren't practical elements of autistic identity in environments that aren't difficult, but I just wanted to just let the characters breathe in a very natural way,
yeah.
because then, yeah, it just, yeah,
And I think, you know, that the nature of the more artistic side of things, they do allow more space for the neutrality of autistic experience. You know, when I think about the sort of writing I do, like, I love the writing I do, I'm proud of it, but a lot of it is geared around, you know, here is a crisis and we need to do something about it. You don't always get, I think, when with the more creative side of it, you can explore more the significance of what others might consider like the mundanity of life, like the mundane things that happen, like a text saying, "Are you okay?" Like, no, it's too much. Yeah, okay, well, you know, you need space. It's difficult to capture those parts of our day-to-day experience in academic writing, you know, in like research, I think. but I think it's really interesting that you're managing to capture everyday life in a way where it's no longer something that is mundane, because it all forms part of this picture that you're creating. And it makes me wonder, moving forward, do you have further plans for Ripples? And, is there anything else that, you're excited to bring into this world of Ripples?
Yeah. I would be remiss if I didn't say this. So years ago, I hope it's okay to mention the autism show. But I remember talking with my disgustingly neurotypical brother. I'm joking. I'm the disgusting part. But I remember talking to him about what I wanted Ripples to be, and a plan that I'd still like to bring to fruition, but in a different way. Started off as, okay, so we'll call him Bro, even though people watching that know me personally will just know my brother's name, and that's cool. But I'm not going to give that away because I haven't asked him. But don't Google me. Anyway, you can Google me, it's fine. I remember saying to him, so there's going to be like 3 realities. There's going to be a scripted reality, I think I called it, which was the book, and that was more the reader gives it life, which I think every reader does. Like my grandma is a good example of that. Maybe the epitome of that is she'll read something, and then in her mind, which is why it doesn't match up with when people see film. But, I imagined the character looks different, because you're creating that reality as a reader. Like, oh, these words mean something to me. That's my reality. So there was going to be a scripted reality. Then there was going to be essentially reality told through film. Can't remember what I called that, but told through, like, I still want to make a short film of Ripples, with the original plan going to be just a continuation of what you've already read. And then there's going to be immersive reality, which I again still want to do, which would be a theatre show. And I've got a theatre show in the works called Compass, which may end up being a completely different thing, but it may also still be linked to elements of Ripples. Because the through line, if you will, was always going to be notes, being that's how Lucas communicates, and I wanted to. So you'll read about some of the notes in the story that you can access on Substack. The idea of the film was to actually maybe see some of those notes, and then in the immersive reality of the theatre show, there were actually going to be physical notes that maybe the audience write. So it's this theme of notes, but it's in different contexts. So that's still, I suppose, the plan. And now I've said it out loud, I suppose it has to be. But yeah, I would like to make at least a short film and a theatre show.
That would be really cool. I'd definitely be up for watching both of those. Or I suppose with theatre it's more participating, but yeah, that sounds like it's exciting to hear of, a creative endeavor, that could come to the screen and the stage that has autistic people written by an autistic person, because I think that's something we lack a lot in our societies. I see a growing number of autistic characters played by autistic people, but then I can't off the top of my head think of a large number of autistic screenwriters, for example, at least not openly autistic. And I think it's really exciting to hear of this immersive world that is being created by an autistic creative that is
I
just
think
waiting to. Sorry, carry on.
No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, it's okay. I've lost my train of thought. But
Sorry. But my brother, I think, thought, because you were saying that you'd love to watch and yeah, engage in both of those things. I think a sticking point at the time with my brother was, yeah, but Cal, people take books to film. That's an accepted thing that happens, or film to books. But you're talking about like three alternate realities almost that merge, but then are standalone. And where's the and yeah, so there was it was interesting at the time, but I'm still going to do it because I think it can work. And if it can't work, why not test it? I suppose the most immediate future projects would be adding more onto Substack. I did write something a long time ago, but I didn't upload properly. Oh, I'm gone. I'm back. It didn't upload properly, where I mentioned about the language dichotomy that I referenced
yeah,
earlier with dementia and being autistic. I was going to put that on Substack and just developing the Substack content, but also the YouTube channel. So I want to do more perspective pieces, meaning elements of the full story, but presented in a different context. So the one that's released at the minute is called Ripples Lucas's Perspective. And even though Lucas may have multiple perspectives within the story, this one's about, because I didn't mention this before, where the dad is confusing Lucas with Jacob. So, which
okay,
again would, and we don't know who Jacob is, much like we don't know who Greg is. So there's I suppose, a similarity within that, but it leads to a kind of identity crisis in his formative years. Lucas, like, who the hell is this Jacob dad? Like, why can't you call me Lucas? Like, that's my name, surely. And he just gets very confused. It's just very confusing. So the YouTube piece with Diamond School of Dance, which I'm going to just shout them out, the founder of Diamond School of Dance, who's amazing. We collaborated on a little dance piece that explores Lucas and Jacob and how they might merge and repel each other. And Jacob being the idea that his dad and society has of quote unquote perfection, what you want to see in life and what you want an autistic person to act like. And Lucas, played by me, Jacob being played by Abby from Diamonds, repelling that and that relationship. So I want to do more of that stuff in the more immediate future, of taking something from the big story and putting it on a different stage, if you will.
yeah. I have to say, I'm the more you tell me about this, the more excited I get, because it really sounds like you're trying to sort of push the boundaries of those sort of traditional ideas of storytelling. You know, it's not just in one format. It's not just even necessarily telling one story. And I like the fact that you've gone into this aware of the fact that, you know, you will write it with, you know, your own interpretation as you write it, but you're open to the fact that every single person who reads it is going to interpret something different. You know, they'll have their own version of the story that their mind will create as they engage with this world. I wonder though, when it comes to how other people interpret the story, do you have any thoughts on how you will reconcile it if other people take something completely different from it to what you realize could be taken from it?
I suppose it's not something I can really control. I always tell to people close to me and in general to control the controllable. And art being art, there will be people that will read into and maybe support characters that maybe I haven't written as, even though I like to think there's depth to each individual. For example, people parents and carers that might read Ripples may really sympathize with the dad, and maybe think that Lucas not communicating as he should, not through notes, is a bad thing, and maybe people, because being situationally mute, as I've tried to write Lucas into being, times when he's overwhelmed, like the text message, and he expresses this. He says, "Yeah, my notes are my safe place essentially, and it's not that I can't communicate; it's that you're just not listening to what I'm trying to tell you, Dad, and other people." And so I'm sure there'll be people out there that will read into that as parents, carers for non-speaking autistics. They'll think that that's again a bad thing, and that Lucas, poor Lucas, he should talk, he should blah blah. But that's fine. I'm open to. I think at the very least, what I can do through the writing is just engage, and it's something I take very personally as a not personally in a bad sense, but as a poet, as I am as well. I it's the same social responsibility I feel to try to be a bridge of dialogue. Now, every event that you might have seen me at, David, I take that very, very seriously, because not everyone wants to or can not only filter the narratives that we might share as an autistic community, but I'm actively putting myself in positions, and it's not to again, not to brag, but I'm putting myself in these situations to try to bridge that gap. And I hope that Ripples can be a brick in that bridge, if that makes sense. But yeah, if not, it's fine.
Yeah. One thing that I like about this particular sort of creation is it makes me think of something that I've toyed around with myself for years, which was I've had this idea ever since I learned about neuroqueer theory of this thing that I call the chaotic self. And with every sort of, the idea is that with every interaction we have, it changes who we are and how we relate to the world, even if it's just a tiny part. And I guess what I see in what you're creating is that as you put this work out there and you see people's response to it, that's going to have an impact on how the story plays out over time. Because ultimately, when we create something, if we carry on creating it over time, then other people's reactions and interactions with our work do have perhaps a variable effect on how that work progresses. And so it's kind of, it lets me nerd out a bit to see this world being created where I can almost see the chaotic self playing a role in fictional characters, not just physical people in the physical world, because it's exciting to see how that will play out over time and where the world of Ripples will go. Because I guess you as the creator have an idea of where the world of Ripples is going, but for us it's new territory, and we don't know how we will interact with those characters in the future for sure yet. But one thing I do know is that interacting with these characters will definitely have an effect on me as the reader. It will ultimately alter something about my world, or it will make something in my world perhaps more obvious or more significant. And I think that's something that really excites me about this project, especially with it being an autistic main character written by an autistic writer. It's seeing where that world will go. And I wonder, sort of, do you feel a responsibility to the people who are reading Ripples, for the impact it will have on their lives moving forward, even if only in a small way?
I hope it reaches people in a positive way. Again, I can't control if it doesn't, but including a carer, including a parent, I think it was a conscious choice to try, and I further explore that in Compass. It may or may not come to light as a Ripple sequel or whatever it becomes of it. I've got the script, 2018. This is the original script, but I need to revise it and see if I can adapt it or see wherever it goes. But in Compass, and maybe even more so than Ripples, it was very conscious to take note of the different characters in an autistic person's life: the carer, the parent, the bog standard person that doesn't know about autistic people. I think I'm trying to, because I think that's true inclusion, and I could make it. It's interesting because I feel like you write the existence of these characters, and that's a very powerful thing, but I also want to root it in as much. I don't know, it's that fine line of just like I said about just if Lucas gets overwhelmed, Haley does this or doesn't do that, and that's cool. I just write it as it should happen because I think it should just happen. We shouldn't maybe question as much as we do, and hopefully people will read certain parts and think, oh yeah, well that's all right. He communicates through notes. That's cool. Like maybe because I've had people close to me in my life with non-speaking autistic children, and the fear is often, in my experiences, interactions with these people, why, when are they going to talk? How are they going to be safe if they can't talk? And so there's a fine line, I think, between acknowledging the parental fear that I'm not a parent myself, but I imagine that for a lot of people, I'm trying to address it in a very non-confrontational way, but I'm also trying to toe that line of some things just are this way and we should probably accept it rather than fight against it. So it's like a weird. I mean, I think if again going back to if parents and carers really get behind the dad that passes away, and maybe dislike Lucas, if I'm going to take this into a theatre show where there's real people playing these characters and real parents and carers come to this theatre show, that's a whole different layer of interaction because maybe it's safe behind this written world, or type written world, but then it's a different layer of interaction when maybe I would go out there playing Lucas and you get people that really dislike how I interpret things, don't agree, because I'm very open with, and sorry if I'm going on too much, please stop me if
That's
you need.
Okay.
But I can certainly see the potential for that happening with Bleach, because it's a very rebellious. Lucas is very rebellious against the norms, and I wanted that to happen. You know, with like the whole middle finger up to the mirror. But there's also several. It makes light, I suppose. It makes jokes out of the. Maybe that's too strong a word because it's again it's addressing like the cures, but in a very like stupid, you know. Why would I almost want to tell you a line, but I think it might be better if you read it, and may hopefully it will resonate in the way I intend. But there's certain cures out there for the autistic community, and Lucas is just saying like, well, that's silly. and that's fine in the written world, but I can imagine that maybe that there are people that are staunch supporters of cures and ways to do things, ways to communicate. But if you take it into a theatrical world, it's very easy for them to come up to you and heckle, or that you wouldn't get that in a written world. So yeah,
Yeah.
just see how it goes.
Well, I'm really excited to see more of this, and I can't wait. Are there any sort of closing remark you want to make? Anything we haven't talked about that you really wanted to say about Ripples before we wrap up?
No, it's on Substack. You search for Ripples, hopefully it comes up. I think I sent the link, but if
Yeah,
not,
so
that's
I
cool.
think we've got the link somewhere. So callumbrazzo.substack.com. Yeah, I'm definitely going to be getting on there and doing some more reading. I'm looking forward to that. And yeah, obviously, this is an Aucademy Live, so we always finish with the same question. What is your favorite stim?
I want to say the lemur at the minute, but we have been like fiddling with its ears and such throughout. But it's actually a yellow stim that I don't have access to at the minute. But it's like essentially it's a dog chew, but I call it a repurposed dog chew. And yeah, it's just really grippy, and I like grippy things and rough textures like walls in everyday life, where yeah you can just yeah. So it's the yellow repurposed dog chew. I put it in my mouth.
Excellent. Well, I hopefully someone in the chat here will tell me what the next episode of Aucademy Live will be, so I can tell people. But if not, it's been really great talking to you, Callum. Like I said, I'm really excited for all of the Ripple stuff. It sounds just really cool. So I'm looking forward to getting more into that world. And thank you so much for coming on and talking to us about it tonight. It's fantastic, and I will definitely be talking to you more about it, no doubt, because I think we're both going to the AIM Pride event, aren't we, at the summer? So that'll be a good chance for me to read more and probably have a million more questions.
Oh, there's so much more I want to say.
Well, thank you to everyone who's tuned in tonight, and I hope you've all enjoyed it. The next episode, as it turns out, is to be decided, so watch this space and you will find out in time. Thank you, everyone, and take care. Good night.